Hey friends, and welcome back to Stronger Every Day. So today I wanted to go over a verse and just kind of dive deep. Sometimes I really like doing that on these videos, especially when I can relate it back to mental health. So let's talk about it. It's going to be Psalms 40, 1 through 3. I waited patiently and expectantly for the Lord, and he inclined to me and heard my cry. He brought me up out of a horrible pit, out of the mere clay, and he set my feet upon a rock, steadying my footsteps and establishing my path. He put a new song in my mouth, a song of praise of our God. Many will see and fear with great reverence and will trust confidently in the Lord. So there's so many things about that verse that I love, right? So from the get-go, I waited patiently and expectantly for the Lord. So how many times when we want something done, we want it done right now, right? Most of us wanted it done in our minds before we even thought about it, right? Everything's instant, everything. You don't have to wait for anything anymore. And so that's our mentality when we think about the Lord, is that if I ask something, or if I'm going through something, and in our case it's whatever mental illness you may have, it's hard because you're having to wait sometimes, right? Sometimes God jumps right in there and handles the situation, and sometimes he lets you wait for a few, and whatever that few looks like, a few hours, a few weeks, a few months. But you're also patiently waiting, and you're expectantly waiting. It's not always easy to wait, especially when you're gonna have a lot of animal noises in the background. We have baby chicks here. Lucille's interested in them, our 18-year-old cat. The dog, you're gonna have a lot of animal noises, and that's just, I can't do anything about that today. So you're patiently and expectantly waiting for God. And so you're not saying, well, I hope he does, or I wish he would. No, you're saying he's going to bring me out of this. God's going to bring me out of this. And that's where you kind of have to get in a mindset of when you're struggling with, in my case, depression and anxiety, that, well, I wish God loved me. You know, I wish he would make this better. No, I am changing my thought process on that, right? And I'm patiently and expectantly waiting on him to pull me out. And friends, it's taken almost 3 decades for me to get to that point, and I pray that it does not take you that long. I know a lot of times you can talk to somebody and tell somebody things, but until they've experienced and realized it on their own, sometimes we have to go through that process, right? It's like when our parents tell us not to touch the stove, it's hot. Don't touch the stove, it's hot. Don't touch the stove, it's hot. But we're fascinated by the stove for whatever reason. So when they've got their back turned, we put our hand on it and we burn ourselves. We had to learn that the hard way, because someone telling us what seems like common sense, we weren't picking that up. So we have to kind of go through it. And is that fun? Typically not. No, typically you're gonna get hurt in some way. But sometimes that's the best way that we can learn, is just to go through it. But I've changed my mindset to know that, friends, we know this. If you've struggled with depression and anxiety over any period of time, you do know that it's going to get better eventually. It's what you're having to go through in the midst of it that's the hard part, and it's convincing yourself. I know the devil got me in a place for years that, yes, it's going to get better. Of course it's going to get better, Chrissy, but it's going to come back, right? And it seemed like every time he had convinced me of this, that every time this happens, it's going to be harder and longer. You're going to struggle with it. It's going to be 10 times harder and last longer, with shorter, quote unquote, rest periods in between. And he had me fully convinced of that. And a friend of mine said, quit speaking that into your life. And I think there's some truth there. I know some people think that you can speak things into your life, and some people think that's just stupid, and I'm not here to debate that. But it's it makes sense to me in the aspect of, if I call myself stupid every day, all day, if I call myself fat, if I call myself ugly, if I call myself broken, if I call myself replaceable, and that's all I say to myself, I'm going to eventually feel that way about myself, because that's all that I'm hearing. And so I've made it a point to say, and I even say it on this channel, that can my depression and anxiety come back? Of course it can. Can God heal me? Of course he can. But I'm not going to speak that into my life, that it's going to come back and it's going to be worse the next time. So I'm patiently and expectantly right there, knowing that God is with me every step. And I say this not lightly. If had it not been for God carrying me most of my life, I would not be here today. There's no doubt in my mind about that. When people say, well, you can't be a real Christian if you have mental illness, because it's a lack of faith and all you need to do is pray and God will take it away from you. And I've related that back to, we would never say that to someone with cancer. The chicks are chirping. We would never say that to someone with cancer or diabetes or heart disease. Can you pray to God and ask him to take those things away? Absolutely, friends, and he can. But sometimes he chooses to let us walk through this journey, and sometimes we don't like it. I can say now that I'm okay with what all I've been through, because 9 months ago, 10 months ago now, God said that I want you to take what's going on with you and help people that are in your situation, help Christians understand that they're not condemned and that I still love them, and that it's a process, we're working through it. Everybody has something that they struggle with, and I'm right there with you. It was about this time, it was June of last year, so June of 22, that I had pretty much, I was done with life. I felt hopeless. I felt worthless. I felt lost. I felt, I've talked in the past before that, and this goes with anybody, but I was a dispatcher in a big city, and I couldn't tell you how many times I've talked to people calling into 911 to let me know that they were gonna harm themselves, and they just wanted their body to be found, basically, or tell my loved one this, and talking to those people over the phone while we were sending help. And I believed with everything in me that their life has great meaning, but I never believed that about myself, and that's still a vice for me. I have to really think hard and believe that in myself. I believe it in everybody around me, but sometimes, and a lot of the time, I can't see the good in me. I can't see the good in myself, but I can tell you all of the things and all of the ways that you've benefited this earth just by being you, by being alive. But it's hard for me to believe that, and I don't think I'm alone there. Mental illness or not, I think sometimes we struggle with that. That is my vice. I struggle very hard with that. I know me better than anybody except from God, and I know that I've done things that are not nice. They're mean. They weren't friendly. They weren't, certainly not an example of what a Christian should be. I've done things that I know that have hurt people, and it was never intended, but it did. And so I guess because I know me and I see what all I've done, and some of the hurt that I've caused, that I fail to realize the good that I've done. And I think a lot of people are like that, especially when you have mental illness. You tend to see the darker, deeper places that you go. There's a movie quote that resonates so much with me, and it's, we like to keep things light until it's time to get dark, and then we get really dark. And if you know what movie that's from, that's fine. I don't think I can say it on here, but I feel that, you know, I don't have control over keeping it light or dark, but when it gets dark, it gets really dark. And so that's why I started this channel, to first off let you know you're not alone, friends. You are not alone. I'm your average, everyday girl, lady, woman, whatever, from Tennessee, and I struggle with this. And if so many of us are out there that are just trying to fake it, right, in public, and put up a perception of what we really are, but it's been eye-opening for me to kind of finally step back and watch other people around me and see just how much hurt there is there and how much love we can actually show. And so I've really tried over the past probably 10 months to be a better person. Don't just speak it, but do it, act it, give it, love it. It doesn't matter if I run around with a megaphone, or if I take out a billboard, or if I take out an ad on social media saying, oh, I started this new channel and it's about being a Christian with depression and anxiety. I don't need to do that. What I can do is let you see me, right? Let you see the change in me. Let me show you how I really should have been the whole time, but I wasn't in a place that I could do that. So the second thing I love about this is out of the pit. First off, if you're not familiar, this is David talking in Psalms, and he's talking about out of the pit, which is, for me, when I hear that, the pit of desperation, the pit of despair, the pit of depression. He set my feet on a rock and steadied my footsteps. What I love about this is, as we've talked in detail, when I'm trying to describe to someone who has no idea what depression and anxiety are or what it feels like, what I can say best to give a visual of what it actually feels like to me in the depths of it is that you're in a fight in a boxing ring, and typically, if you're getting plummeted, someone's going to throw the towel in and call the fight, right? But no one does when you're in that pit of depression and mental illness. And you get beat down to where you just barely have your head up, and then they just keep beating you, and that's when you'll hear yourself say, I can't do this anymore. I can't fight anymore. I'm tired of the fight. I'm tired of fighting. After almost 30 years, believe me, I understand what you mean when you're tired of the fight. Like, at what point do I just get to live? At what point do I not have to fight every single day just to stay alive? That's where we are. And when I'm trying to explain it to someone, that's what I feel like. I feel like no one's throwing in the towel. What I love about this is that Jesus pulls us up out of that pit. So he throws the towel in, right? Let me rephrase that. He doesn't even throw the towel in. He just stops the fight and pulls you up, right? Then he stands you on a rock, which can be unsteady. And if you've been in the depths of depression and anxiety, when you start coming out, you're not steady, you're wobbly, right? So God stables us on this rock and gets us steady, right? He's just the love, right? That's him loving us. Just think about that. You've been sitting down there just getting plummeted and no one is stepping in to help, and then bam, there's God. And he stops the fight. He reaches down. He helps you up, holds you, puts you on a rock, and steadies you, right? Then he continues to love you. That's the other part of this that I love. A new song in my mouth of praise, or a new song in my mouth, a song of praise. So that's the whole point of this, is becoming aware of how to control your mind, how to control your thoughts, how to control what's coming on. And so we go back to when I was saying, if I repeat to myself that I'm horrible, I'm worthless, I'm nothing, all of the negative garbage that we tell ourselves on a daily basis, that I don't know that any of us would actually speak to another human like that we speak to ourselves. But instead saying, when those thoughts start creeping in, no, I'm gonna think about God. I'm gonna think about pasture. I'm gonna think about baby chickens. I'm gonna think about my kids. I'm gonna think about my husband, my wife, my mother, my father, who, whatever makes you happy. No, I'm going to stop and think about that. Is in the beginning, is it easy? No, it isn't. I bet I battled. He would put a bad thought in, and then I would pray and get a good thought. He would put a bad thought, and I remember the first several while, I don't remember exactly how long, I was exhausted, mentally exhausted from fighting all of the negative junk that kept creeping in my mind, and I had to make myself replace those crap thoughts with good ones. What I love about this is there's days that I'll just be real honest, I'm zapped. Reading and studying the Bible, I could read it out of obligation, but whose obligation is that? God already knows the Bible, right? So am I reading it just to get a little check mark to say I did it? There's days that my comprehension is so not there that I don't read the Bible. There's days that I listen to a sermon, or listen to a preacher preach, or listen to another podcast or whatever about being a Christian, and there's days that works. There's days that that's too much. So I'll just turn on some praise and worship music, and that's what I love about this, is he's pulled you up out of that pit of depression and despair, mental illness. He steadied you. He didn't just pull you up and let you flop. He's pulled you up, he's steadied you on a rock, and then he's giving you a song of praise. And so he's changing our thought process, right? He didn't give us a song of condemnation, or you know, all these things that I do believe well-meaning people say to people that struggle with depression and anxiety. He pulls us up out of that pit, steadies us, and then he gives us a song of praise. So he's changing what we're focusing on. We went from being on the floor, being beaten, to being rescued, pulled up, steadied, and then given something to change our thought process. And that is so vital for me. Between changing my diet, drinking more water, being more active, and for me what that looks like now is keeping the house clean, keeping the yard maintained. We have 13 acres. Keeping the goats moved. We rotate them. Now we have chickens. Taking care of the chickens, changing their water, changing their bedding, making sure they're eating, drinking, happy. The heat plate is the right height. The garden is coming in, so it's out there working in the garden every day, taking care of the house, the finances, the groceries, the cooking, all of that. So that is what I mean by activity. And for someone who struggles with depression and anxiety, you know, some days you're doing good just to get out of bed that day, right? And I think for me, for so many years, it was either you go to work or you don't eat, right? You go to work or you lose your home. You go to work or you lose all the things that we need: food, shelter, clothing, water. And so I just kind of stuffed it down and never dealt with it. And I think we do that a lot. And this verse, I love it because it's kind of the whole transgression from being in the pit to being better. And I try to say this as honestly as I can, because I don't want to give false pretense or false hopes. Some people, it clicks just like that and you're better. And man, I am so happy. I am so happy for y'all. I've said this before. I try to teach people and talk with people about what it feels like to have depression and anxiety, but I never, not anyone do I want them to feel what I have felt inside. I don't want you to know to that level what it's like to deal with this, because it's hard. It's hard to fight physically, mentally, and spiritually to stay alive sometimes, and that's where we're at. Let's just be flat out honest and blunt about it. That's where we're at sometimes. It's, Lord, I can't do this, bring me home. I cannot recall how many times I've said that, Lord, I cannot do this anymore, bring me home. Prayed that he would just bring me home. I was tired, I couldn't do it anymore. I understand that. I've heard so many people say, well, I can't believe somebody committed suicide. I can't fathom that. I can't understand that. I do understand that. You get to a point that For me, it was, number one, I can't keep going like this. I can't keep feeling the way I feel, both physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, every possible ailment that you could have, from pains and aches to constant just condemnation thoughts going through my head of how much better my family would be, how much better my friends would be, that my life has meant nothing, that I'm not important to my family, my husband, my friends, my kids, anybody. No, I'm going to fight this, right? And we have to learn to talk about it and help people in a loving way. Can I get fired up? Absolutely. Ask just about anybody that I know. I can get fired up. There's certain things that just invoke a passion response in me, and before I know it, that passion is turned into irate, you know? And this topic has been one of them. It takes a lot for me to respond to someone who has comments like, depression is a sin, mental illness is a sin, it's a weakness, you're just weak, you're pathetic, you know, you need to pray about it and quit spending $200 on a therapist. That was what one pastor said. In all actuality, I read something today, 73% of farmers are depressed. 1 in 10, I believe it said, will commit suicide. Pastors, I think it was 72%, have admitted to being defeated, depressed, full of anxiety, troubles at home, troubles at work, exhausted, tired. So I think we like to kind of put people that have depression and anxiety in a little box, right? Nobody's like you. Apparently there are a lot of people with depression and anxiety and mental illness. Just try to get into a facility to help with that, whether it be a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a counselor, whatever that looks like. Most of them have a month, 2, 3 to 6 month wait list. You are not alone. Christians are struggling with mental health and depression and anxiety. Stop the stigma that what they are going through is less than, and that they are weak and pathetic because we are struggling with depression and anxiety. I went through a list of people in the Bible that struggled with depression and or anxiety. I know that I know without a doubt, so it doesn't faze me anymore, that had it not been for God and my relationship with Him, I would not be here today. God has never not loved me, and I've never lost faith in Him, despite the fact that I'm coming up on 30 years of depression and anxiety. I've never lost sight of I love God, and if it not for Him, I would not be here right now. And I can tell you this, that just since I started this channel, it may not be millions, but I've helped 1 or 2, and that means a lot, because that's 1 or 2 people who don't feel like I felt back last June. So we're going to end this video here. Read that verse if you haven't read it before. It's Psalms 41 through 3, and just kind of dive deep into it. That's what I enjoy doing, is taking a verse or a couple verses and just kind of diving deep and pulling out what that means for me, what that speaks to me. And so it's amazing that you can read a verse and read a verse and read a verse, and then all of a sudden it has God gives you another, hey, this is what, you know, this is another little tidbit of this. So I end every video this way. Friends, I hope that you feel this with all of your heart. I've said before, I don't care if you watch this video, if you skip to the very end, it does not, I mean, the point of me doing this channel is to help people. And if you want to skip to the very end, skip to the very end. Friends, God loves you. I love you. Your friends love you. Your family loves you. And we need you here. We'll see you in the next one, friends. Bye.